Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I would like to say that I'm very glad to be back in India again, the country which I discovered more than 50 years ago when I was posted as a young officer in the French embassy. So I thank the IDSA for here. So I will try to be shorter considering the time. And anyway, Professor Lamb has already spoken about the Western, intervention in West Asia and particularly America, of course. So I would like, however, to start to talk about the what you said about the number of Muslims in France, because that has got some importance to the issue of today. You said maybe there will be in the future 30% of French people who will be Muslims. So actually, we don't know the number, but probably I think the percentage of Muslim in France is higher than the percentage of Muslim in India. And if I ask in some towns, in fact, more than 70 or 80% of the populations are Muslim. In Marseille, there are a lot of people. Actually, these Muslims are not coming from West Asia. They are coming, as you can guess, from Northern Africa, mainly from Algeria. If I ask you, for instance, what is the second language spoken in Marseille, what will you answer? French. It's a joke, but however, it may not be a joke in the future. That's a fact. And what is also relevant is to think about the number of Muslims in the army. That's important too. Of course, we don't have any figure. It's not allowed to publish figure, either for the normal population, either for the army. But I was told that the percentage of Muslims in the army is much higher than the percentage of Muslims in the normal population. But I don't know the actual number. I mean, for other ranks. So that's, I wanted to make that reflections to begin with. So let's start now with the subject you asked me to deal today, the Western actions in West Asia, what we call actually Middle East in Europe, in France particularly. I would like to, first of all, to mention the relationship which exists between West Asia and North Africa. I think we cannot discuss the problem in West Asia without having in our mind, I mean, also what happens in Northern Africa. In fact, it's an Arabic problem from Morocco up to Iraq. That's the first point. Second point, I would like to speak about NATO, because NATO, of course, has a major role all over the world. It should not be, but it is like that, and particularly in West Asia. So NATO, on the NATO members, had a problem when the Soviet Union disappeared. We are no more enemies, and that was a bad thing, according to Mr. Gorbachev, I think what he said. Not to have an enemy is very bad. In fact, it has got a very negative impact on the creation of Europe, what I think. So NATO actually has become a problem for everybody because the Americans wanted NATO to go on, and the Europeans accepted to go on. NATO now has got a universal role even in Afghanistan and of course in our in West Asia. So I will be trying now to mention what the Western nations have done in the West Asia, but I will be short. However, as I said, I will mention also what has happened in Northern Africa. And in Northern Africa, there is one important thing which happened in Algeria, particularly, when there was an election in December 1991. As you may know, the Islamists won the first round of election. And President Bouteflika, under the pressure maybe of France and other Western countries, decided to declare this election null and void. So the Islamist groups, which had won the first round, could not happen to not appear to the second round because it was not done. So I think that was a mistake in a way. I do not want, of course, to defend the Islamist radicals, but I think that should be a great experience even for West Asia if the Islamists had taken power in Algeria, because we would have realized that these people are not better than the other world to rule the country, they are even worse. And the problem would be that the population, the Algerian population, probably would have reacted against this Islamist government. And the reaction would have been internal. The change would have been done not through an external intervention, but through an internal one. And that would have been important. Of course, you will tell me there would have been many killed people, maybe there would have been riots, possibly. But what has happened actually, there were at least 200,000 people who were killed during the revolution or during the manifestation in Algeria between 92 and 95. It was quite a lot. If the Islamists had taken the power for a short time, I think, maybe a few years, and they would have been, withdrawn, probably the number of killed people would have been less. So that's the point I wanted to mention. And of course, one thing important was the intervention of the Western nations, at least some of them, in Iraq in 2003. That was a major event, of course. As you may know, France abstained. We didn't want to join the Americans and the British to invade Iraq, and I think we were right, as the events afterwards showed us. But I would like to speak more now about the recent events, that means the events which happened in 2011. Many things happened, of course, in Northern Africa as well as in West Asia. First of all, I think these so-called internal revolutions were not totally spontaneous. Of course, there were some internal surges in movement, no doubt about it, but there was also some external interventions, particularly Western interventions, because the Americans and the Europeans wanted to change the regime of the many Arabic countries, especially those who were unfriendly to us. So at the time, even the Americans supported the Muslim Brothers. So what happened? An interesting experience in Morocco. The Prime Minister of Morocco is an Islamist. That's a good experience in a way. But the Islamists are not ruling alone. There is a coalition of the government. But however, the Prime Minister is an Islamist. In Tunisia, we can say that the revolution has been half a success or half a failure, as you like. But otherwise, in Egypt, you know the situation as it is, so it is a complete failure. In Libya, I think the French and the British have made mistakes to intervene then. We see the results now, and the Americans, of course, supported us too, so we are all responsible for that. In Bahrain, you know, when there was an upheaval, popular upheaval, the West did not react at all. And in Syria, what happens? The Western countries chose to support the militants against the regime. The Americans have trained a lot of people to fight against the government. So it appears that the West follows contradictory politics, non-intervening in Egypt, where a semi-dictatorial regime prevails now, and not preventing Saudi Arabia and Qatar to help Islamist radical movements in Syria. In fact, the Western countries are very much embarrassed. They don't know what to do. I think now there is, however, a small change. We begin to realize in America and in Europe that we have to work with Assad, the president of Syria, we like it or not, to fight against the Islamist radical in Syria. So what are the reasons of the Western intervention in West Asia? I think it's not so much dependency on oil, because particularly now the Americans, they are exploit the shale oil resources. And in Western Europe, we have also some other sources to get oil. So this is not the main reason, probably. The Western world, as I said, wanted to impose democracy to peoples who are not ready to adopt it. And we have to admit it. We have to admit our responsibilities. We have strong interest, or we had strong interest, in weapons procurement. We wanted to sell weapons to some Arabic countries, including Saudi Arabia and the Gulf states. And also, we have to mention, also it's not the main factor, the egos of the rulers of Western Europe also played a role. Some leaders, British, French, wanted to intervene. Our chief of government, our presidents wanted to be victorious commander-in-chief to rebuild their internal image, which was deteriorated. However, some European countries were more cautious, and particularly Germany. As far as European Union, it is a political dwarf, and Europeans as such do not intervene in West Asia, as in fact in other parts of the world. To finish, I would like to go on. I would like to mention rapidly the disastrous consequences of Western interventions. True, I mean, Saddam Hussein, of course, was not an ideal ruler. But however, we have created a chaos in Iraq. The Iraqi army and administrations were disbanded, state collapse, chaos reigned supreme, and the invaders have contributed to the creation of Islamist groups, including Daesh. Many of the former soldiers of Saddam Hussein have actually joined Daesh. So the intervention of Libya, as I said, resulted in the dislocation of the country, the destruction of a part of archaeological heritage, destruction of economic infrastructure. This intervention in Libya has also created massive migrations toward Europe. These migrations happened before, but they have been increased because of our intervention in Libya. And weapons and ammunition have been provided, thanks to that, to the Islamic militants in the south of Sahel, particularly in Mali. So the intervention in Libya was a complete disaster. Of course, the regime of Saddam Hussein, Gaddafi, were not ideal. But I do think that the population of those countries, Libya and Iraq, regret the former time. Probably they lived better before than now, and that's a very sad thing to say. So to finish, I would like to mention the change of attitude we should have. Despite our mistakes, we hesitate to change our policy, but we should change it. As I said, we start to change it in Syria. That's not enough. We should not try to promote democracy. Instead of dictating our will, we should leave the people to decide their own destiny. After all, if there are inter-Sunni fightings between different factions of Islam, it's sad for the population, they will suffer. But they will weaken also these dangerous movements. So I think the West should not intervene to impose changes of regime. The West countries should only intervene, militarily speaking, if we are attacked, if we are threatened, not otherwise. And even if we are attacked, if we are threatened, we should limit our counteractions to pinpoint actions on precise intelligence and not else. Furthermore, anyway, we have big problems in our own countries, as you know. We have to spend a lot of money to assure our own internal security. We had terrorist act in France, as you know. And we have also internal problems. We contributed in a way to dislocate many countries, but now in Europe we are also suffering from a possible dislocation of countries. You have heard of Catalonia, you have heard of Scotland, Corsica also may be a problem. Well, we never know what may happen, so we have to look after our own problems. So I think the West should distance itself from Saudi Arabia and Qatar and consider Russia, Egypt, and Iran as real allies in the war against radical Islam. Sanctions against Iran should be stopped, but anyway, I think they will be because of the nuclear deal, and that will be a good thing, really. I mean, intelligence is being now shared with the Russians, and I think if we come closer to Saddam, to President Assad in Syria, there will be again exchange of intelligence between Western countries and Syria. Because when we stop the diplomatic relations with Syria, of course, there will be the relations which existed between the intelligence services of France and Syria stopped. So we were deprived of information. So I will finish with this.
Thank you.